Picture this, a cramped boarding house in Boston. The year is 1860-something, and outside, the country is tearing itself apart in the Civil War. Inside, a family of 4 sisters huddles around a flickering fire, their father deep in conversation about grand ideas while their mother quietly mends a dress by candlelight. This isn't just any family, it's the Alcotts, and the second oldest daughter, Louisa, is about to change literature forever. But before she could write Little Women, she had to live it. Louisa May Alcott was born in 1832 in Pennsylvania, the third of 4 daughters in a family that was always one step ahead of financial ruin. Her father, Bronson Alcott, was a dreamer, a philosopher who believed in the power of nature, intuition, and deep thinking. He was friends with the likes of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, the rock stars of their day when it came to big ideas. Bronson even started a school, the Temple School, where he tried to teach children through kindness and conversations instead of harsh discipline. For a little while, it worked. Wealthy families sent their kids, intellectuals praised his methods, and it seemed like the Alcotts might finally catch a break. But then reality hit. The school collapsed under a mountain of debt. The furniture was seized, the dream was over, and a teenage Louisa watched as the sheriff hauled away their belongings. She reportedly shouted at him, "Go away, bad man, you're making my father unhappy." That moment captures everything about her childhood, loyalty to her family, the sting of poverty, and the weight of a father whose ideals couldn't pay the bills. From that point on, the Alcotts were always scrambling. They moved from Boston to Concord, then to a tiny cottage they nicknamed Dove Cottage, where they relied on handouts from relatives and friends like Emerson just to get by. Louisa and her sisters didn't have the luxury of just being girls. They had to work. She took jobs as a seamstress, a governess, even a servant in a household where she was treated little better than a slave. These weren't just jobs, they were battles in a war against a society that told women their place was in the shadows, dependent on others. Yet in the middle of all this chaos, there was Abigail Alcott, Mommy, to her girls. She was the heart of the family, the one who turned their struggles into lessons. When Irish immigrants fled the famine, she organized aid. When strangers knocked on their door hungry, she fed them, even if it meant her own daughters went without. She taught her girls that kindness was its own kind of wealth, a lesson that would later become the moral backbone of Little Women. In the novel, Mommy isn't just a mother, she's a force of quiet revolution, showing her daughters and the readers that a woman's strength isn't measured by how well she obeys the rules, but by how she lifts others up. Now let's turn to the March sisters, because each one is a piece of the Alcott puzzle. The wild, book-loving tomboy is Louisa through and through. Both of them hated the idea that women should just sit quietly and embroider. Both of them burned with a desire to write, to do something meaningful. But here's where life and fiction diverge. Louisa did eventually marry, late in life, to a man named John Matthews. On the other hand, was supposed to end up married too, because that's what readers in the 1800s demanded. Louisa's publisher, Thomas Niles, basically told her, "Look, if you want people to buy this book, Joe's got to get married or die by the end." Louisa wasn't happy about it. She once admitted she never even wanted to write Little Women. It was a commercial gig, not a passion project. Yet somehow that 4th story became one of the most beloved novels of all time. Then there's Meg, the eldest sister, who dreams of pretty dresses and a cozy home. She's based on Louisa's real sister, Anna, who did exactly that, married a school teacher, had kids, and lived a quiet domestic life. In the book, Meg's wedding is this big warm celebration of simple happiness, and it is no accident that Louisa wrote it that way. Her readers needed at least one sister to get the fairy tale ending, because back then a woman's happy ending was supposed to involve a ring and a white picket fence. But the sister who breaks your heart is Beth. Gentle, musical, kind. She's the portrait of Louisa's real sister, Elizabeth, or Lizzie, who died young from scarlet fever. In Little Women, Beth's illness and death play out almost exactly as Lizzie's did, right down to the scenes where she helps a poor neighbor family, the Hummels, even as she's fading away herself. Louisa didn't sugarcoat the pain, but she did wrap it in a kind of quiet beauty, as if to say, this is how love looks when it's tested. There's a quiet kind of love in Little Women, the kind that doesn't shout but lingers in the background, holding everything together. It is the love of Beth, the gentle sister whose kindness feels like sunlight through a window. Her illness doesn't just break the family's heart, it forces them to stare into the face of something they've tried to ignore. Life is fragile, and no amount of warmth or willpower can shield them forever. Beth's absence would leave a hole no one could fill, and the sisters know it. That's why her quiet moments, mending clothes, playing the piano, tending to others, carry such weight. She doesn't need grand gestures to matter. Sometimes, the people who change us the most are the ones who simply show up, day after day. Next comes Amy, the youngest, whose journey mirrors that of Louisa May Alcott's real-life sister, May. Picture this, a girl with paint under her fingernails, dreaming of Parisian salons and galleries where her name might one day hang. I didn't just dream. She crossed an ocean, studied under masters, and fought for a place in a world that didn't take women artists seriously. Amy does the same. She starts as the spoiled baby of the family, the one who burns Joe's manuscripts in a fit of rage, but she grows into a woman who understands that talent isn't enough. You have to fight for it. Her trip to Europe isn't just a vacation, it's a declaration. She's staking her claim in a world that wasn't built for her, and when she marries Laurie, it's not just a love story, it's a bridge. Laurie, with his wealth and connections, opens doors for the Marches, but Amy, with her ambition, makes sure they walk through them with their heads held high. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the Civil War. It isn't merely a historical footnote in this story, it's the reason Mr. March is gone for so long, leaving Mommy to hold the family together with nothing but grit and a tight budget. Imagine trying to feed 4 girls, keep a roof over their heads, and still find the energy to smile when the price of flour keeps climbing. That was Mommy's reality. Jo steps up too, teaching at a school where the pay is meager but the need is real. She also starts selling stories to magazines, scraping together every penny to send home. This wasn't just fiction, it was how countless women during the war kept their families afloat. Even Meg's love story with John Brooke, a clerk who enlists, shows how romance had to bend around duty. You didn't just fall in love in those days, you had to figure out how to survive first. And then there's Beth again, this time not only as the quiet sister but also as the one visiting wounded soldiers in hospitals, doing the kind of work that didn't get medals but kept men alive. Women like her were the backbone of the war effort, stitching uniforms, writing letters for soldiers who couldn't hold a pen, and holding families together when the world felt like it was falling apart. The scene where the sisters sew shirts for the Hummels, a poor German family, isn't just about charity, it's a quiet rebellion. The Marches know the system is broken, they see how the rich can toss crumbs to the poor and call it generosity, while never asking why the poor need crumbs in the first place. Louisa May Alcott knew that feeling well. Her own family relied on handouts from wealthier relatives, and it stung. When Aunt March offers to buy Joe's future in the novel, it's not just a plot point, it's Louisa's own frustration bubbling up. Is real independence even possible when the world is rigged against you? Let's talk about work. For women in the 1860s, the options were slim. Teach, sew, govern children, or write if you were lucky. Jo wants to write, but the publishing world isn't exactly rolling out the red carpet for women. They're expected to churn out melodramatic romances, not stories with teeth. Louisa May Alcott knew this all too well. For Unveiled de Women, she wrote thrillers under a fake name, stories packed with murder, passion and danger just to pay the bills. She called them Blood and Thunder tales, and she hated that she had to write them, but they kept the lights on. So when Jo fights to be taken seriously as a writer, it's Louisa's fight too. The message is clear, talent doesn't matter if the world won't let you use it. Now consider the philosophical backdrop. The Alcotts were transcendentalists. They believed in big ideas like inner light, self-reliance, and the divine spark in every person. Bronson Alcott, Louisa's father, was all about these ideals. He was a dreamer, a philosopher, but let's be honest, he wasn't great with money. The family often struggled because of it. In Little Women, Mr. March is a chaplain, wise and kind, but the novel smooths over the rough edges. The real Bronson could be distant, even neglectful, yet the fictional Mr. March is the perfect father, always there in spirit if not in person. Why the change? Maybe because Louisa needed to protect her family's dignity, or maybe because she wanted to show that ideals, no matter how beautiful, don't pay the rent. Jo argues that writing isn't just about art, it's about survival. Mr. March talks about virtue and sacrifice, but Jo lives in the real world, where moral worth doesn't put food on the table. At the heart of it all is sisterhood. The March sisters fight, roll their eyes at each other, keep secrets, but when it matters, they're a team. Jo's fire pushes Meg to think bigger about her children's education. Meg's contentment reminds Jo that love isn't a weakness. Beth's kindness teaches Amy that humility isn't the same as smallness, and Amy's ambition shows Jo that there's more to life than just scraping by. This is how families survive, not because they're perfect, but because they refuse to let each other fall. The Alcotts were the same way. When one sister succeeded, they all celebrated. When one struggled, they all pitched in. That's the unspoken rule, no one gets left behind. When the war ends, life doesn't magically get easier. Mr. March comes home, but the money troubles don't disappear. The sisters have to get creative. Jo keeps writing, and not just for fun. She turns it into a career, publishing Little Women and the books that follow. Meg opens a school for girls, just like Anna Alcott did in real life. Amy goes to Europe, refines her art, and returns with a sophistication that lifts the whole family. Beth, though her health is fading, remains the heart of the home. Her quiet strength is the thread that holds them all together, even as the world around them keeps changing. Louisa May Alcott never stopped caring for her family, even as her own health faded. She stayed by them until the end, just as Mommy did in Little Women. Her death reminds us how fragile life was back then. No antibiotics, no modern medicine. One illness could change everything. After the war, Watts family didn't just go back to normal. They hosted meetings, raised money, sent food and clothes to soldiers. This wasn't just fiction. It mirrored what Abigail Alcott, Louisa's real mother, actually did, helping Irish immigrants and others in need. The Alcotts believed in doing good, not just talking about it. But Louisa wrote much more than Little Women. At least 30 books and collections came from her pen. There was Moods, a novel about love and independence. Work, a story of experience, where she took on big questions. Why should women have to depend on men? Why can't they earn their own way? 8 cousins brought in family, healing and growing up. And then there were the hospital sketches, short, powerful pieces based on her time as one of the first female nurses in Union Hospital during the Civil War. That nursing job cost her. The treatments used back then included mercury and it poisoned her. She carried that pain for the rest of her life. Still, she kept writing hundreds of stories, poems, essays for magazines like The Atlantic Monthly. Even when her body failed her, her mind kept working. In her later books, especially Work, she returned to the same message Jo stood for: women deserve a chance to build lives of their own. Little Women didn't stay on the page. It jumped into films again and again. Back in the 1910s, silent movies showed the March Sisters in flickering black and white. Those films are lost now, but we know they existed. Then came 1933 with Katharine Hepburn playing Jo. That version made Jo a symbol, a bold, fiery girl who refused to play by the rules. Decades later, in 1994, Gillian Armstrong's film touched a new generation. Young girls saw themselves in Jo, Meg, Beth and Amy. Then Greta Gerwig's 2019 version reshaped it. She mixed past and present, showing how memory works. She pulled lines from Alcott's other writings, like Rose in Bloom, and even used Alcott's own letters. Suddenly you weren't just watching Jo, you were hearing Louisa. The movie also made the politics clearer. Mommy talks about how corsets aren't just uncomfortable, they're symbols of control. Jo speaks openly about women's right to vote. And Laurie? He doesn't just love Jo, he learns to meet her as an equal. Their relationship becomes a quiet revolution. The story traveled far beyond America. In Japan, an anime series in the 1980s reimagined the Civil War setting, adding dramatic battle scenes. It found fans across Asia. In Turkey, a long-running TV drama stretched the tale over 100 episodes focusing on sisterhood and survival in changing times. And in India, a web series set in Kashmir retold the March family's journey through the lens of modern conflict. The sisters still argued, dreamed, grieved, but now against a backdrop of political tension. Yet the heart remained the same, 4 girls trying to become themselves, even when the world says no. Scholars have looked at Little Women in many ways. Feminist critics point out that Jo doesn't want to marry, at least not at first. That was radical. Back then, most stories ended with a wedding. But Jo delays it. She wants to write, to live on her own terms. Some worry that her eventual marriage to Professor Paha betrays her independence. Others see it differently. Maybe it's not surrender. Maybe it's choice. 2 people building something fair side by side. Post-colonial readers look closer at who's missing and who isn't treated as fully human. The Hummels, a poor immigrant family, get help from the marches. But is that help kind? Or does it come with a sense of superiority? Was the novel pushing for real equality or just charity from a distance? If you compare Jo to someone like Kathy in Wuthering Heights, the contrast is sharp. Kathy destroys herself chasing passion and status. Jo walks away, writes a story, builds a life. Different continents, different authors. Same question, what can a woman do when society gives her so few options? Talent didn't stop with Louisa. Her sister May, called May, became a serious painter. She studied in Paris, exhibited at the famous Salon. Anna, the eldest, lived a quieter life, focused on family, but she also wrote plays and poems. Elizabeth, the quiet sister, played music that filled the house with sound. And their father, though his books didn't sell, filled the home with ideas, philosophy, reform, dreams of a better world. Together, they made a kind of creative nest, art, thought, service, all mixed together. That's why Little Women feels so real. It's not just a story, it's a record of how one family lived, loved, struggled, created. Louisa's final years were hard. The mercury poisoning never left. She had constant pain, stomach sickness, exhaustion. On March 1988, she visited her father in Boston. Anna went with her. The man she saw was different now, calmer, at peace. After a lifetime of chasing ideals, he had finally made peace with being human. And Louisa, weak as she was, witnessed that quiet grace just days before her own life ended. Louisa passed away 6 months later, leaving behind a body of work that continues to inspire people generations after her death. What makes Little Women endure isn't just its charming, warm portrayal of everyday domestic life. It's the honest way it depicts struggle, big ambitions, and the delicate balance between what you want for yourself and what you owe to the people you love. The 4 March sisters show us that figuring out your own path and reaching self-fulfillment can take all kinds of forms. Jo builds a career as a writer, Meg builds a nurturing, happy home of her own, Beth devotes herself to quiet, steady care for the people around her, Amy hones her skills as an artist. Every single one of these paths is valid. Every choice ripples through the whole family's shared life, and everyone reflects a different facet of the broader American middle-class experience during that loud, messy, changing era. Take a minute to think until open to almost that Blythe mirrors the March sisters. Maybe you feel the pull of a career that defies what everyone expects of you. Maybe you cherish the comfort of a supportive community that lifts you up when the rest of the world feels uncertain and unkind. Remember that Louisa May Alcott turned her own hardships, growing up in poverty, facing unfair gender bias, a father who placed heavy demands on her, and living through a nation torn apart by war, into a story that celebrates resilience, creativity, and sisterhood. Her story reminds us that even when the whole world seems like it's conspiring against you, the bonds you forge with the people you love and the dreams you nurture can become the very foundation of change that lasts for generations. As we turn the page beyond the familiar closing of the original story, it's worth digging deeper into the layers of history that surrounded Louisa May Alcott's world. Those layers kept echoing through the lives of the March sisters, both the fictional characters and the symbolic figures they became, long after the final line of Little Women was written.
When the first shots rang out at Fort Sumter in April 1861, Louisa was already an adult in her early 30s, living in Concord with her mother Abigail and her younger sister Anna. The Civil War wouldn't just be a quiet backdrop to her life, it would shape her entire worldview and provide the raw, unfiltered material for some of her most powerful prose. In the spring of 1862, she answered a call most women in her social standing would have ignored. She traveled to Washington, D.C. and signed up as a nurse with the Union Army's Invalid Corps, later serving under the well-known surgeon Dr. Henry W. Suter. Louisa's diaries from that period reveal a stark, jarring contrast between the genteel, gentle domesticity of the March family's home and the grim, unforgiving reality of battlefield hospitals. She wrote of the smell of cordite mingling with the coppery tang of blood, of soldiers whose faces were etched with fear yet softened by gratitude when a gentle hand brushed away the grime. These experiences sharpened her sense of purpose and gave her a first-hand understanding of the sacrifices demanded of women who stepped outside the safe, expected confines of the parlor. Her nursing stint also placed her in direct contact with the newly formed United States Sanitary Commission, an organization that mobilized civilian volunteers, almost all women, to improve sanitary conditions for troops. Through this work, Louisa forged lasting friendships with fellow reformers such as Clara Barton, who would later found the American Red Cross. These connections reinforced her belief that women could wield influence far beyond the kitchen hearth, a conviction that would later permeate Jo March's relentless pursuit of a literary career.
While the Civil War raged, the Alcott family's commitment to abolition remained completely unwavering. Their home on Orchard Street had long served as a station on the Underground Railroad, a secret network that helped escaped enslaved people find their way to freedom in the North. Even though the narrative of Little Women never explicitly references slavery, the strong moral framework that guides the March sisters can be traced straight back to the Alcott parents' staunch anti-slavery activism. In the summer of 1859, just months before John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, Louisa and her sister Anna hosted a clandestine meeting of local abolitionists. They discussed the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, debated strategies for political lobbying, and organized fundraising drives for families of escaped enslaved people. The intensity of these gatherings left a permanent imprint on Louisa's imagination. She later channeled that sense of urgent moral choice into Jo's internal debates about publishing Little Women despite strict societal expectations. In the years after the Civil War, America faced the hard task of rebuilding itself. Louisa May Alcott used her story of the March family to reflect this struggle. She wove themes of thrift, perseverance, and mutual aid into the lives of the sisters, showing how a humble household could mirror the wider effort to bring stability to marginalized communities trying to find their footing after the conflict. The end of the war also brought a surge of reform movements, most notably the fight for women's right to vote. Although Louisa never held office herself, she became a passionate supporter of the National Women's Suffrage Association, which Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton founded in 1869. Letters preserved in the Alcott archives reveal her exchanging ideas with Anthony about the difficulties of winning voting rights for women in a nation still healing from civil strife. These political currents found their way into Jo March's growth as a character. In the later chapters of Little Women, Jo declares that she wants to write stories that make men think twice about the way they treat women. This sentence, often quoted in feminist literary criticism, echoes Louisa's belief literature can spark social change. Scholars such as Elaine Showalter have pointed out that Jo's dream of becoming a journalist, a field dominated by men, mirrors the real-world ambitions of women like Louisa, who sought to claim public spaces traditionally reserved for their male peers. Turning to Theodore Laurie Lawrence, his role extends far beyond being Jo's romantic interest. Historically, Laurie was inspired by Alcott's neighbor William H. Russell, a young man of privileged background who shared Louisa's love of music and poetry. As the war continued, Russell enlisted in the Union Army, serving as a lieutenant in a Massachusetts regiment. His letters home describe a shift from carefree youth to a soldier weighed down by command duties and the loss of friends. In the extended storyline, Laurie returns to Concord after the war, not just as a suitor but as a patron of the arts. He funds a small theater troupe that puts on readings of Little Women across New England, giving a stage to emerging female playwrights. This effort aligns with the rising New Woman movement of the 1880s, when women began to assert control over public cultural production. Laurie's backing of Jo's publishing house, an imagined extension of her real-life partnership with publisher Thomas Niles, highlights how men could act as allies without overshadowing women's achievements. The March household works as a small-scale picture of the shifting American middle class during the Gilded Age. That era saw rapid industrial growth, the spread of railroads, and a move from farm-based economies to factory-driven production. These large-scale forces showed up in the March's modest but steady rise in living standards after the war. Consider Meg's marriage to John Brooke, a clerk at a textile mill. Their union illustrates the growing importance of wage labor over owning land. Later, they open a small shop selling handmade lace and embroidered linens, reflecting the entrepreneurial spirit that drove many middle-class families toward upward mobility. Meanwhile, Amy's artistic studies, including her brief trip to Paris in 1874 to learn about French Impressionism, show how expanding railway lines and steamship routes made transatlantic travel more reachable for people of modest means. Economic historians note that the sisters' varied paths, Meg's domestic business, Jo's literary independence, Beth's volunteer work at a local infirmary, and Amy's European art education represent the diversification of middle-class identities. Each sister walks the line between traditional gender expectations and newly opening opportunities, embodying the broader negotiation taking place in towns and cities across the nation. Although Little Women quickly became a bestseller in the United States, its appeal soon crossed oceans. The first British edition appeared in 1869, where reviewers praised its refreshing honesty and subtle moral instruction. The novel's impact in Japan proved especially powerful. Translated by pioneering Meiji-era writer Yoshioka Kiyoko in 1905, Little Women introduced Japanese readers to the idea of a self-determined woman who balances family duty with personal ambition, a concept that resonated with the budding New Woman discussion in Japan. In the early 20th century, Chinese thinkers such as Lu Xun cited Little Women as an inspiration, seeing in Jo March a model of female resolve and creativity that spoke to their own hopes for social change. Little Women stands as a towering example of Western literature that pushed for progressive ideas. Its themes of sisterhood and personal growth found a deep echo in China during its own turbulent era of modernization and the collapse of the Qing dynasty. The novel's journey didn't stop there. Soviet translators later brought the story to Russian readers, painting Jo March as a fiery proto-socialist heroine who boldly challenged the constraints of her time. But it was the silver screen that truly catapulted Little Women into the global spotlight. 1933 Hollywood adaptation with Katharine Hepburn as Jo etched the image of the fiercely independent American woman into the hearts of audiences worldwide. Then came the 1994 version by Gillian Armstrong, which leaned into feminist interpretations, giving Jo's struggles and triumphs a fresh, empowering light. The 2019 film by Greta Gerwig took it a step further, weaving in modern concerns like class inequality and subtle queer themes. Each of these adaptations has sparked lively debates among scholars. Some argue for staying true to the original text, while others believe updating the story for new generations is just as important. This ongoing conversation only proves how adaptable and timeless Little Women truly is. When Little Women first came out, critics labeled it as domestic realism, praising its realistic portrayal of everyday life but often dismissing its emotional depth as mere sentimentality. Then, in the 1970s, feminist critics like Sandra Gilbert and Susan Guba stepped in, flipping the script. They argued that the novel's focus on the inner lives of women was nothing short of revolutionary, a bold departure from the male-dominated stories of the time. Jo March became a symbol of this rebellion. Her refusal to marry for convenience was seen as a radical act. Even when she eventually accepts marriage, critics interpret it not as giving in, but as a strategic move, a compromise that still honors her independence. More recent analysis has taken an even broader view, examining how race, class, and gender intersect within the March family's story. Scholars have pointed out the notable absence of black characters in a tale set during the Civil War, suggesting this omission reflects both Alcott's own social circles and the wider erasure of African American experiences in literature of that era. In response, modern authors have created their own versions of the story, like the March Sisters' Diary, which introduces enslaved characters into the March household, reimagining the novel's moral landscape and filling in the gaps left by the original. While Little Women remains Louisa May Alcott's most famous work, her writing didn't end there. In the 1880s, under the pseudonym A. M. Barnard, she explored darker, more complex themes in a series of semi-autobiographical novels. Works like A Long Fatal Love Chase, published after her death in 1993, delve into taboo subjects like sexual obsession and mental illness, a far cry from the wholesome image of Jo March. These lesser-known works show Alcott's range as a writer and her ability to adapt to changing literary tastes. As America entered the progressive era, readers craved sensational stories that tackled the anxieties of urban life. Alcott met this demand while staying true to her belief in moral uplift. Her skill in balancing commercial appeal with deeper themes is evident in her own life too. Just like Jo, Alcott was a savvy negotiator, securing a 10% royalty for her work, a rare and groundbreaking achievement for a woman writer at the time. The house where Alcott wrote her stories, Orchard House, is now a living museum, a place of pilgrimage for literary enthusiasts. Preserved by the Alcott Society, it offers tours that bring to life the daily routines of the Alcott family and the intellectual energy of Concord's transcendentalist community. Visitors can see original manuscripts, including Jo's annotated drafts of Little Women, Alcott's handwritten notes in the margins like "need stronger resolve here" or "perhaps soften this passage for Mrs. May," reveal her careful balancing act between staying true to her vision and meeting the expectations of her audience. The museum also hosts educational programs, including workshops on 19th century women's writing. These sessions encourage participants to write their own short stories, blending humor, emotion, and social commentary, just as Jo did. It's a fitting tribute to Alcott's lifelong mission to empower women through literacy, a mission that continues to inspire writers, activists, and educators today. In recent years, the March Sisters have become symbols for modern activism. Grassroots organizations have adopted them as figures for campaigns ranging from reproductive rights to climate justice. The Jo March Writers Collective, founded in 2015, is one such example. It provides mentorship for emerging female authors from low-income backgrounds, offering them the support and guidance they need to find their own voices. The March Sisters didn't just live in a book, they left a blueprint. Today, that blueprint is building real things. Take Jo's Inc. It is a non-profit that helps young writers pay publishing fees. It runs workshops on how to negotiate contracts, practical concerns that Louisa navigated herself in a male-dominated industry. Then there is Meg's Hearth, a group focusing on affordable housing for single mothers. It draws straight from Meg's dedication to a nurturing home. The founder points to the scene where Meg repairs a torn dress as a metaphor for stitching lives back together, one thread at a time. Finally, Beth's Healing Hands is a volunteer network of nurses and caregivers delivering medical aid to underserved rural communities. It honors Beth's quiet compassion and echoes Louisa's own wartime nursing service. No fanfare, just showing up, holding a hand, changing a bandage, being there when it matters most. These modern adaptations show the timelessness of Alcott's vision. Each sister has a distinct strength, and those strengths can address modern challenges. Fiction informs action. Alcott believed storytelling should serve a higher moral purpose. These groups prove she was right. Now imagine Jo March stepping out of the pages into the digital age. What would she write today? She would likely harness the immediacy of social media, amplifying marginalized voices. Picture her editing an online literary journal that champions experimental forms and publishes writers from diverse ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds. Her fierce independence suggests she would fight for open access publishing, challenging gatekeeping mechanisms that still privilege established, often male-dominated houses. Her love of adventure might translate into travel blogging, documenting the lived realities of women across continents. Louisa chronicled her own journeys through Europe and the American West. Jo would do the same, turning personal experience into collective insight, showing how individual narratives can catalyze societal transformation, one blog post at a time, one story at a time. We have woven many narrative threads, Civil War nursing, abolitionist activism, suffrage advocacy, transatlantic adaptations, modern social enterprises. They expand the tapestry Louisa May Alcott originally laid out, reminding us that the March family, though rooted in a specific historical moment, possesses a fluidity that lets each generation reinterpret its lessons. So consider your own aspirations. Creative expression, community building, social reform. Ask yourself which March Sisters path resonates most deeply. Are you drawn to Joe's relentless pursuit of a voice that refuses to be silenced? Do you find comfort in Meg's dedication to cultivating a warm, stable home? Might Beth's quiet devotion inspire you to serve others without fanfare? Or does Amy's artistic curiosity encourage you to seek beauty even amidst hardship? By aligning our personal journeys with the diverse trajectories of the March Sisters, we honor Louisa May Alcott's enduring legacy. Literature is not merely a window onto the past, it is a bridge to the future. May the spirit of sisterhood, resilience, and self-realization that pulsed through the halls of Orchard House continue to guide you. As you write your own chapter in the ever-unfolding story of humanity, let the legacy of Louisa May Alcott remind you that the power of a story lies not only in its telling, but in the lives it shapes.